I thought being given away would feel like the end, but it was only the beginning of something I didn't understand yet. The rain hadn't stopped for hours, tapping against the cracked window like it was trying to warn me, and I stood there in the dim kitchen light, counting the seconds between my father's footsteps and his next decision. The air smelled like cheap whiskey and regret, the kind that settles into walls and never leaves. I kept my eyes on the floor because eye contact only made things worse. Only made him remember I was there. And sometimes forgetting was safer. Sometimes silence was the only thing that kept the night from getting heavier. But tonight felt different. Heavier in a way I couldn't explain. Like something was coming. Something bigger than the arguments. Bigger than the debt collectors who used to call and hang up. Bigger than the life I'd been trying to survive one quiet day at a time. Then came the knock. Not polite. Not hesitant. A sharp, deliberate sound that didn't belong in our small house. My father froze. And that scared me more than anything. Because he never froze. He stumbled. He yelled. He avoided. But he didn't freeze. The second knock came harder, like a countdown. And I felt my heartbeat shift. Faster. Louder. Filling my ears until it was the only thing I could hear. Don't say a word, he muttered. But his voice had already given him away. Whoever was on the other side didn't wait for permission. The door opened anyway. And the air changed. Colder somehow. Quieter. Like the room itself understood something I didn't. 3 men stepped inside, dressed in dark suits that didn't belong in a place like this. Clean, sharp, controlled. Everything we weren't. They didn't look at the mess, didn't comment on the broken things or the peeling paint. Their attention went straight to him. And then to me, like I had always been part of the conversation. Even when no one told me, "You're late," one of them said, calm, almost bored, like this was routine. Like this was expected. My father tried to speak, tried to explain, but the words came out tangled, weak, and for the first time, I saw something I had never seen on his face before. Fear, real fear, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that doesn't pretend. And then he said it, the sentence that split my world in half. I don't have the money. Take her instead. And just like that, I stopped being a daughter, stopped being a person. I became a solution, a trade. A way out. My breath caught somewhere in my chest. But no one asked me anything. No one needed to. Because in that moment, my life wasn't mine anymore. And as I stood there, waiting for something, anything to change, I realized no one was coming to stop it. No one ever had. No one argued with him. Not the men in suits. Not even the silence in the room. And that was the moment something inside me shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a quiet realization that whatever happened next had already been decided without me. One of the men stepped closer, not rushing, not forcing, just waiting, like he already knew I would move. And I hated that he was right. My feet felt heavy, but they moved anyway. One step, then another, because staying felt worse than leaving. Because there was nothing left here that would change anything. Not the cracked walls, not the broken promises, not the man who refused to look at me as I passed him. I stopped at the doorway for half a second, just long enough to think maybe he would say something, anything. But he did not, and that silence followed me outside into the cold night air. The rain had softened to a steady drizzle, the kind that soaked through fabric without you noticing until it was too late. The black SUV waited at the curb like it had always been there, engine running, headlights cutting through the dark. One of the men opened the back door for me, not rough, not gentle, just precise. Like this was routine, like I was not the first, and would not be the last. I slid inside, expecting something, a command, a warning, anything. But the door closed quietly behind me, sealing me into a world that felt too still, too controlled. And then I saw him, sitting across from me, already there, like he had been. Waiting, Alexander Romano. I did not know his name yet, but I felt it in the way the air changed around him. He did not move when I looked up. Did not speak, his gaze. Steady, unreadable, taking everything in without giving anything back. I pulled my hands into my sleeves, suddenly aware of every small detail. The worn fabric, the dampness, the way I must look compared to him. His suit perfectly tailored, his presence filling the space without effort. The car began to move, smooth and silent, like we were gliding instead of driving. And still he said nothing. The city lights blurred past the window, stretching into streaks of gold and white, and I counted them, one after another, because it was easier than thinking about where we were going. Easier than asking questions I was not sure I wanted answered. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Time felt strange in that silence, like it had slowed down just to make me feel every second. And then finally, his voice, low, controlled, cutting through everything. Are you afraid of me? It was not a threat, not even a question that demanded an answer, just a statement waiting to be confirmed. I swallowed, my throat dry. I do not know you, I said. And it was the truth, the only safe truth I had. Something flickered in his expression, not anger, not amusement, something quieter, almost thoughtful. He leaned back slightly, studying me like I was something unfamiliar, something unexpected. Good, he said after a moment, his voice just as calm. You should not decide that yet. The words settled between us, heavier than anything else that had been said, and for the first time since the door opened. Back at the house, I felt it again, that strange, unsettling shift, like the story I thought I was in was not the real one at all. The car slowed before I realized we had left the city behind, the bright lights fading into long stretches of darkness broken only by distant street lamps and the occasional passing car. Everything outside felt quieter, emptier, like the world itself had pulled back, and when the gates appeared, tall iron bars sliding open without hesitation, I understood something without needing it explained. This was his world, and everything inside it moved because he allowed it to. The SUV rolled forward, smoothly, tires crunching lightly against gravel as we entered a property that felt less like a house and more like a statement, large, controlled, untouched by chaos. I caught my reflection in the tinted window for a second. Pale, tired, completely out of place, and I almost did not recognize myself. The car came to a stop under a covered entrance, and before I could reach for the door, it was already opened from the outside. The same quiet efficiency, the same lack of hesitation. I stepped out slowly, my shoes sinking slightly into the gravel as I looked up. The building rose above me. All clean lines and soft lighting, no broken windows, no peeling paint, nothing out of place. It felt unreal, like I had stepped into someone else's life by mistake. Inside, one of the men said, his voice respectful but firm, not directed at me, directed by him. Everything here seemed to orbit around the same center. I walked forward because there was nothing else to do. The doors opened before I reached them, and warmth met me instantly. Soft light, polished floors, the faint scent of something clean and expensive. It made my chest tighten in a way I could not explain. Not fear, something else, something unfamiliar. I hesitated just inside the entrance, unsure where to stand, what to touch, what I was allowed to be in a place like this. Footsteps sounded behind me, steady, unhurried. I did not need to turn to know it was him. You can stop looking for exits, Alexander said, his voice calm, almost conversational. There are none you need to worry about. I turned slowly, meeting his gaze again, trying to read something, anything, but his expression remained controlled, distant, like he had already considered every possible reaction I could have. Am I supposed to thank you? I asked before I could stop myself, the words slipping out sharper than I intended. Something flickered in his eyes, not anger, not quite approval, something closer to interest. No, he said simply, stepping closer, close enough that I could feel the difference in presence, the weight of someone who never needed to raise his voice to be heard. You are supposed to understand where you are. I crossed my arms instinctively, grounding myself in the only way I knew how. And where is that? I asked, refusing to look away, refusing to shrink even if everything in me told me to. He studied me for a long second, like he was measuring something invisible. Then his gaze dropped briefly to my wrist, to the faint marks I had tried to hide without thinking. And for the first time, something in his expression changed, not softer, not exactly, but focused in a different way, sharper, more deliberate. He looked back at me, and when he spoke again, his voice was lower, quieter, but carried more weight than anything he had said before. You are somewhere you will not be hurt again. The words settled into the silence between us, and I felt it, that shift, subtle but undeniable, because for the first time, I did not feel like something that had been taken. I felt like something that had been removed, and I was not sure which one was more dangerous. I did not believe him, not at first, because safety was not a word that had ever meant anything real to me. It was something people said in movies, something temporary, something that disappeared the second you trusted it. And yet the way he said it, calm, certain, like it was already decided, made it harder to dismiss. I looked around the room again, really looked this time, at the clean lines, the untouched surfaces, the quiet order of everything. Nothing was out of place, nothing felt unpredictable, and that alone made me uneasy, because I had learned to survive chaos, not control. You expect me to just believe that, I said, my voice quieter now, but still steady, still holding on to the last pieces of resistance I had left. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he walked past me, slow, deliberate, like he had all the time in the world, and I turned slightly to follow his movement, unwilling to let him out of my sight. He stopped near a table by the wall, picking up something I had not noticed before, a glass of water, untouched, placed there before we even arrived. Prepared, like everything else, he set it down again without drinking, his attention returning to me. Belief is not required, he said, only observation. The words settled into me in a way I could not ignore, because observation was something I understood, something I had always done without realizing, watching moods, reading silences, predicting what came next before it happened. It was how I survived, and now he was asking me to do the same thing here, in a place where nothing felt familiar. Then what happens now? I asked, because standing there, suspended between what I had been and what I was supposed to become, felt worse than anything else. He studied me again, that same quiet intensity, like he was always looking for something deeper than what I showed. Now you rest, he said, simple, direct, like it was not a suggestion, but not a command either, something in between, something that left the choice hanging in the air, even though we both knew it was already made. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding, the tension in, my shoulders shifting, not gone, but different. And tomorrow, I pressed, because tomorrow mattered. Tomorrow was where consequences lived, where everything caught up to you. His gaze did not waver. Tomorrow you decide what to do with what you have been given. The phrasing caught my attention. Given, not taken, not owed, given. I almost laughed at that, the irony too sharp to ignore. You call this given, I said, gesturing vaguely around me, at the house, at him, at everything that had changed in the last hour. Something in his expression tightened for a fraction of a second, the first real crack I had seen. You are here because I chose to intervene, he said, his voice still controlled, but carrying something heavier underneath, something that felt closer to truth than anything else. What you do with that is up to you. I held his gaze, searching for a lie, for any sign that this was just another version of control dressed up as something else, but all I found was certainty, unwavering and absolute. And that unsettled me more than anything, because for the first time, I could not tell if I had been taken into a cage or pulled out of one, and the difference between the two felt thinner than I was ready to understand. I did not sleep, even when the house went quiet and the lights dimmed to a soft glow that made everything feel distant, almost unreal. They had shown me to a room that was larger than the entire place I had grown up in, clean sheets, soft lighting, a window that overlooked acres of darkness instead of cracked sidewalks and flickering street lamps. It should have felt like relief, like something I had always wanted without knowing it. But my body did not understand comfort. It stayed alert. Every sound sharper than it should have been. Every shadow something to track. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, hands folded tightly in my lap, staring at the door like it might open again without warning, like everything would reset, and I would wake up back in that kitchen. But the silence held, steady, controlled, nothing breaking it. And that was what made it harder, because chaos I could predict, chaos had patterns, this did not. I stood eventually, moving slowly through the room, touching nothing at first, then letting my fingers brush against the surface of the dresser, smooth, solid, real. I opened the closet halfway, expecting something I could not name, but it was empty except for neatly hung clothes that were not mine, new, untouched, placed there for me. The thought made my chest tighten again. Not fear exactly, something closer to confusion, because nothing about this made sense in the way my life had always made sense. I moved to the window, pressing my hand lightly against the glass, cool and steady beneath my skin. The ground stretched out beyond it, quiet, protected, no shouting, no sudden noises, just stillness. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt something loosen inside me. Something I had been holding for so long I had forgotten it was there. The tension shifted, not gone, but softer at the edges. I closed my eyes briefly, taking a breath that did not catch halfway through, and that alone felt unfamiliar. When I opened them again, I saw movement below, a figure crossing the courtyard with the same measured pace I had already come to recognize. Alexander. Even at a distance, his presence was unmistakable, controlled, deliberate, like everything he did had purpose behind it. I watched him without thinking. The way he paused briefly to speak to someone. The way the other man straightened slightly, attentive, respectful. No raised voices, no urgency, just quiet authority. And I realized something then, something small but undeniable. Nothing in his world happened by accident. Nothing slipped out of control, and somehow, I was now part of that. The thought should have scared me more than it did, but instead it settled into that same strange space inside me where fear and something else were beginning to blur together. I stepped back from the window, glancing once more at the room, at the bed I had not used, at the door that had not been locked, not even once. And that detail stayed with me longer than anything else, because if this was a cage, it was not one that needed bars, and if it was not, then I did not know what to call it. I moved to the door slowly, my hand hovering over the handle for a second before I turned it. It opened without resistance. The hallway beyond, just as quiet, just as controlled. No guards, no barriers, nothing stopping me from walking away. And for the first time since all of this began, I understood what he had meant. The choice was real, the door was open, but as I stood there, looking into a world I no longer belonged to and one I did not yet understand, I realized something that made my chest tighten in a completely different way. Leaving was possible, but it was no longer simple, because somewhere between being taken and being placed here, something had already started to change, and I was not sure I wanted to pretend. It had not. I did not walk out. Even though the door stayed open and the hallway waited for me like it had nothing to hide, I stood there longer than I should have, listening to the silence, testing it, like it might break if I moved too fast, but it did not. Nothing rushed toward me. Nothing stopped me either. And that was the strangest part, the absence of pressure, the absence of expectation. It left me with something I was not used to having, space to choose, and I did not know what to do with it. I stepped into the hallway slowly, my bare feet quiet against the polished floor, the air cooler out here, carrying a faint scent of something clean, something controlled. Every door I passed was closed, every light placed exactly where it needed to be, nothing random, nothing careless. I followed the corridor without thinking, turning once, then again, until the space opened into a larger room, the kind of place that felt designed for presence, not comfort. High ceilings, soft shadows, furniture arranged with intention rather than convenience. And at the far end, near the windows, he was there, exactly where I had seen him from above, like he had not moved at all. Alexander stood with his back partially turned, one hand resting lightly on the edge of a table, speaking quietly to a man I did not recognize. Their conversation stopped the moment I stepped closer, not abruptly, not awkwardly, just a natural end. Like everything else here, the other man nodded once and left without looking at me, his steps measured, respectful, and then it was just the two of us again. The distance between us smaller now, more real. He turned fully, his gaze settling on me without surprise, like he had expected this, like he had been waiting for me to decide. "You did not sleep," he said, not a question, just an observation. I shook my head slightly, unsure why I answered at all. No. The word felt small in the space, but it was enough. He studied me for a moment, his eyes moving briefly over the details I could not hide, the tension, the uncertainty, the fact that I was still here. "Good," he said quietly, and something about that response caught me off guard. Not praise, not approval, just acknowledgement, like my reaction had confirmed something for him. "Why?" I asked. Because I needed to understand at least one thing. Needed something solid to hold on to. He moved then, not closer, but enough to shift the space between us, enough to make me aware of him in a different way. "Because you are paying attention," he said, and the words settled deeper than I expected. Because that was what I had been doing, watching, measuring, trying to understand the rules of a place that had not been explained to me. And what does that change? I pressed, my voice steadier now, less reactive, more deliberate. He did not answer immediately, his gaze drifting briefly toward the window, toward the darkness outside, then back to me. It means you will see the difference sooner, he said, and I frowned slightly, the meaning just out of reach. The difference between what? I asked, and this time, he stepped closer, not enough to invade, just enough to make the distance intentional, controlled, between being owned, he said, his voice low, even, and being protected. The words landed with a weight I was not prepared for, because they forced something into focus that I had been avoiding since the moment my father spoke. I held his gaze, searching again, testing again, and for the first time, I saw it clearly, not softness, not kindness in the way I understood it, but something else, something steady, something that did not waver, and I realized then that whatever this was, whatever he had brought me into, it was not about taking something from me. It was about deciding what I would no longer have to give, and that thought stayed with me long after the silence returned, long after I understood that I had not been brought here by accident, and maybe, just maybe, I had not been meant to leave. I should have pushed back, should have told him that protection did not come from men like him, that nothing in this world came without a cost. But the words stayed in my throat because something deeper told me he already knew every argument I could make, and he had already decided they did not matter. I crossed my arms tighter, grounding myself in the only way I understood. You talk like there is a difference, I said, my voice quieter now but sharper, more focused, but it still sounds like control. His gaze did not shift, did not harden. It remained steady, almost patient, like he was waiting for me to reach a conclusion on my own. Control takes without permission, he said. Protection removes what should never have been there. The distinction hung between us, thin but impossible to ignore. I let out a slow breath, my mind turning over every moment from the past 24 hours. The house, the deal, the silence, the car ride, the open doors, the absence of force where I had expected it most. Nothing fit the pattern I knew. Nothing followed the rules I had learned to survive by. And that unsettled me more than anything else, because if the rules had changed, then everything I relied on was suddenly useless. And what do you get out of it? I asked, because that was the question that mattered, the one that always mattered. Nothing like this happened without a reason, without a return. His expression shifted then, not visibly, not in a way anyone else would notice. But I saw it, the smallest pause, the slightest recalculation, like I had finally asked something worth answering. Clarity, he said after a moment. The words simple but deliberate. I frowned slightly. That does not make sense, I replied, and for the first time, something almost like amusement touched the edge of his gaze, brief and controlled, gone as quickly as it appeared. It will, he said, and the certainty in his voice made something tighten in my chest again. Not fear, not exactly, something closer to anticipation, which made even less sense, because I had never associated anticipation with anything good. He turned slightly then, reaching into the inside pocket of his jacket, the movement smooth, unhurried, and for a second my body reacted before my mind could catch up, a flicker of tension, a readiness I had learned without realizing. But when he pulled his hand back, there was nothing threatening in it, just a small set of keys, simple, unremarkable. He stepped forward and placed them on the table between us, the soft sound louder than it should have been in the quiet room. The front gate opens with that, he said, his tone unchanged, like he was offering something ordinary, like this was not a moment that would define anything. I stared at the keys, then back at him, trying to understand what I was missing. You are giving me a way out, I said slowly, testing the idea as I spoke it. He did not look away, did not hesitate. I am giving you a choice, he corrected, and that word again, choice, it echoed through everything he had said since the moment I arrived, and I realized then that this was not about keeping me here, not in the way I had expected. This was about something else entirely, something I had not learned yet. I reached out slowly, my fingers brushing against the cool metal, half expecting him to stop me, to change his mind, but he did not move, did not react. The keys were real, the option was real, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, the next step was mine to take. I closed my hand around them, the weight small but undeniable, and when I looked up at him again, I understood that whatever happened next, whatever I chose, It was not going to be simple, because leaving would mean going back to everything I had just escaped, and staying would mean stepping into something I still did not understand, and standing there between those two realities. I realized there was no version of this where I remained the same. The keys felt heavier than they should have, cold against my palm as if they carried more than just metal, more than just the ability to open a gate. I turned them slightly between my fingers, listening to the faint sound they made, grounding myself in something real while everything else felt uncertain. Why me? I asked finally, because the question had been there from the beginning, buried under shock, under confusion, under everything I had not had time to process. But now it surfaced, clear and unavoidable. Alexander did not answer right away, and that silence told me more than anything else, because it was not hesitation, it was selection, like he was choosing how much of the truth I was ready to hear. He stepped closer to the window, the faint light catching the sharp lines of his profile, controlled, deliberate, always composed. "You think this started tonight," he said, his voice low, almost reflective. I frowned slightly, the idea catching me off guard. "It did not," he continued, turning his gaze back to me, and something in his eyes shifted, not softer, but more direct, more intentional. "I knew about you long before your father ran out of options." The words landed slowly, like they needed time to settle into meaning. My grip on the keys tightened without me realizing. "That does not make sense," I said, but my voice lacked the certainty it had before, because something in the way he spoke made it harder to dismiss. "It does," he replied. "You just have not seen the full picture yet." My mind raced through possibilities, none of them fitting, none of them enough. "You were watching me," I said, the realization forming piece by piece. And for the first time, something close to confirmation passed through his expression, subtle but undeniable. "I was aware of you," he corrected, precise even now, like every word mattered. "There is a difference." I let out a quiet breath, trying to steady the sudden shift inside me, because this was something else. Entirely, something that reached back further than I had expected, further than I was ready for. "And when did I become important enough for all of this?" I asked, gesturing slightly with the hand that held the keys. With everything this represented, he held my gaze, unflinching. The moment it became clear no one else was going to step in. The answer was simple, almost too simple, but it carried a weight that pressed against everything I thought I understood. I shook my head slightly, trying to process it. "So you decided to," I said, the words quieter now, less defensive, more searching. He did not deny it, did not soften it. "Yes," he said, and that was it. No explanation, no justification, just a decision stated like fact, like it had always been. Inevitable. The room felt different after that, not physically, but in the way I stood in it, in the way I looked at him, because this was no longer about a transaction, no longer about a debt or a deal. It was about something far more deliberate, something chosen. I glanced down at the keys again, then back at him. The choice still there, unchanged, still mine, but now it carried something else, something I had not considered before. Meaning, I walked past him slowly, not rushing, not hesitating, each step measured, each breath steady, until I reached the front door, the same one I had walked through hours ago without understanding anything. I paused there, my hand hovering over the handle, the keys still in my grip, the weight of everything pressing in. Behind me, I could feel his presence, not moving, not stopping me, just there, constant. I turned the handle slightly, just enough to feel it give, just enough to prove that I could leave if I wanted to. The night air slipped in through the small opening, cool, familiar, carrying with it everything I had known before, everything I could return to. I stood there for a long moment, caught between two worlds that no longer felt equal, and slowly, without looking back, I let the door close again, the quiet click echoing louder than anything else, because in that moment, I understood something I could not undo. I had not just been given a way out, I had been given a reason to stay. The sound of the door closing stayed with me longer than it should have, a quiet, final click that did not echo through the house, but settled somewhere deeper, somewhere inside me. I stood there for a moment without moving, my hand still resting against the wood, as if I could feel the choice I had just made through it. Not leaving, not running, not going back to something I already knew would not change. I turned slowly, the keys still in my grasp, And when I looked at him again, something had shifted, not in him. He was exactly the same, composed, unreadable, certain, but in me, the hesitation had changed shape. It was no longer about whether I should stay. It was about understanding what staying meant. So that is it, I said, my voice quieter now, not defensive, not challenging, just steady. I stay and everything is suddenly different. He watched me carefully, like he was measuring the weight of my words, not interrupting, not correcting, giving me space to reach my own conclusion. No, he said after a moment, his voice low, controlled as always. You stay and you begin to see what was always different. The distinction landed slowly, but it held, because something in me recognized the truth in it. Even if I could not fully explain why, I walked back toward him, each step more certain than the last. The space between us no longer felt like something to cross, but something that had already been bridged. You planned this, I said, not as an accusation, but as a realization, and this time he did not deflect, did not reframe it. I prepared for it, he replied, precise as ever, and somehow that was more unsettling, because preparation meant time, meant intention, meant this had never been random, never been an accident of circumstance. I glanced down at the keys one more time before placing them gently on the table where he had set them, the small sound marking the end of something I could not return to. Then you already know I am not going anywhere, I said, and the words felt heavier than I expected, because they were not forced, not taken, they were chosen, and that made them real in a way I was still learning to understand. His gaze held mine, steady, unwavering, and for the first time, there was no distance in it, no calculation, just recognition, like he had been waiting for this exact moment, not controlling it, not pushing it, just allowing it to happen. I know you understand, he said quietly, and something about that phrasing settled into place, because it was not about possession, not about ownership. It was about awareness, about seeing something clearly for the first time and choosing not to look away. The silence that followed was different now, not tense, not uncertain, just present, like everything else in this place. And as I stood there, no longer caught between leaving and staying, no longer trying to define what this was in terms I already knew, I realized something that changed everything in a way I could not undo. I had not been given to him. I had been found, and somehow, in a world where nothing had ever been mine, that truth felt more powerful than anything else he could have taken.